Also, thanks for supporting CACLACICon, our local conference here in North Carolina, my home state conference. Thanks to Kurt Bob and the organizers also for giving us the opportunity to get together and for me to speak today. I hope this is a discussion. I've got more content that I can actually get through because I want to be able to address the questions that you guys might have. I'm going to talk about some leadership stuff, some personal like qualities and values about what it takes to be a founder, and I've also got some metric-y sort of stuff around the things you should look at and measure in your business. So I guess that's us. We're going to talk about what it means to be a founder and what that is, what it means to build your team, and what it means to build a company or grow a company. Before I do an introduction of myself, I'd like all of us to get to know each other. So by a show of hands, how many people are from North Carolina? Awesome. And how many people are not from North Carolina? Awesome. So for the folks from North Carolina, can we give a round of applause and a big welcome to the folks that are joining us here today? Awesome. Welcome to North Carolina. I got a couple other questions to warm the crowd up too. How many current founders do we have in the audience? Awesome. How many people in the audience want to be a founder or are thinking about being a founder or a small business owner for the first time? Awesome. And any serial entrepreneurs? Anybody that's had multiple businesses? Awesome. I will buy you a drink later. I understand the pain. And I guess the last question is, are there any folks in the room that just want to know how leaders think or how founders think or anything like that? Got it. Feel free to ask questions at any point. I'll have one slide where I get kind of lectury or preachy. I feel strongly about that topic. But other than that, stop me at any time, and let's make this a discussion. And as for myself, my name is Sult. I'm a career investigator. I've been doing criminal investigations, or I did my first criminal investigation about 16 years ago. I've been in cyber ever since, always in the private sector. I've never had a badge or a gun or been in the military. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've had a bunch of businesses fail, and I've had one where I was a founder that was a wild success. And I practice servant leadership. I'm also a proud member of the certified member of the Maxwell leadership team. If you guys know what that is, then you'll see a couple of things in here from John Maxwell. I'm also the resident yard gnome. I'm a receiver of short jokes.
What is the Maxwell Leadership Foundation?
We could talk about the Maxwell Leadership Foundation a little bit later, but okay. John Maxwell is a well-known leadership author and kind of thought leader in the leadership space. He's a big proponent of servant leadership, where I believe it's my job to support my team and to create an environment where people can be effective and so on. I've done this in a multinational environment. We'll talk a bit about that in a second. And I guess in addition to leadership, I do like to think I'm still techie, but it's hard to come to a hacker conference and not release some code or talk about something techie. So it's a little bit awkward standing up here and doing that. These are some of my accomplishments. I was the CTO and co-founder of Harangi Cybersecurity. I was the first cybersecurity startup in Singapore back in 2016. When I left during COVID. It was very difficult to work nights, and I didn't want to be away from my family for an undefined period of time. We had about 135 employees. I'm NDA'd. I can't talk about what the revenue numbers, but they were really good. And I guess one of my major accomplishments there is most of the folks that reported to me ended up being CEOs, founders, or senior executives in other companies around the region, and one of them is starting a company and moving it to the U.S. now. So probably that's my biggest accomplishment. Black Panda, after I left Harangi, I became the Chief Incident Response Officer at Black Panda, and I had a very clear mission. I know Gene, the CEO there, very well. He needed me to play a small part in helping with raise their Series A. We raised a monster $15 million Series A last year. This is all stuff very important to founders. And I also had a mission to establish and stabilize their Asia-based investigations team. And if anybody's tried to hire blue teamers in Asia, you'll know how difficult that is. That was a very difficult mission, and I was working night shifts from the U.S. and traveling to Asia. It was brutal. And ironically, Black Panda and myself, we were the reference customer for Binalize's Series A. So Black Panda, we raised a $15 million Series A, and Binalize 5 months later overshadowed us with a $19 million Series A. And I am now the chief investigator at Binalize because I get to work daytime hours. It's also a really great team. In other words, I have kind of stumbled into this career where I help founders build cyber companies, and that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today is what that really takes. And if there's anything I've really learned, it's that entrepreneurship is hard. And if you look around the room and you look to your left and your right, you'll realize that this is not some gritty war movie, and it's not some college campus, some fancy college campus with an intimidating dean telling you half the people are going to go. If you look to your left and your right, you'll realize that all the people in this room, they're going to be here tomorrow and next week and next year, and in 5 years if we support each other, because as founders and entrepreneurs, we're in this together. This is our community, the folks in this room, and we all face similar challenges. And if you ask for help, we'll help each other. And most founders don't ask for help early enough. We're here for each other. I'm here for you. If you have a problem, let's talk, and I'll take the time and help you figure it out. However, it is hard, and if you have what it takes, it'll be the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. Of course, there's other things like having children. I've got a young 18-month-old at home. But in your professional life, as an entrepreneur, there's nothing more exciting and nothing more rewarding that you can do. I'm 37 years old, and four or five of the people that have reported to me are CEOs now. I don't know how much more a stronger sense of reward I can feel. So there's supposed to be a dramatic pause here because I can't come to a tech conference without writing some code. So yeah, it's okay to laugh if you want to. However, I was way too impressed with myself with writing some code. But yeah, ChatGPT wrote it. So yeah, what is an entrepreneur? And this is where I'd like to get some answers from you guys. It's a blank slate. What's an entrepreneur? Anybody?
Someone who identifies problems, pain points, and tries to make them go away.
That's a good answer.
A masochist who enjoys being poor.
That's a great answer.
Can you repeat that for the people in the back?
Yeah, so a masochist who enjoys being poor. I have definitely been through that.
Someone who, after the iPhone leaves because it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, it could be. That happens a lot. You get a lot of burnout, absolutely. I like to keep a fairly broad answer, and having talked and knowing a bunch of entrepreneurs, I believe that it's an individual committed with real commitment to creating a future that's not currently possible. You find pain points, you want those pain points to go away for other people, and you commit to that mission. In other words, that means we all have vision. We can see a future that doesn't currently exist. These are some not so famous entrepreneurs, but people that have affected many of our daily lives. Does anybody in the room recognize any of these individuals? Does anybody have some names? Just any other names? Kevin Mandiant? Any other names? Yeah, H.D. Moore. If H.D. Moore has probably affected all of us in this room, you're either users of what he did or you're victims of all the people that use his tools. This guy on the top left, his name is Tony Fadell. This is the only one I'll really go over. He actually helped make the iPhone become a real thing, and he is one of the most down-to-earth people I have ever met in my life. He's got almost zero ego, and he tells you just how it is. And that's an incredible thing. With the fact that he's able to stay humble is quite incredible. The thing that those 6 people have in common with all the rest of the entrepreneurs in this room is what their daily life looks like. And this is it. It's a combination. It's either absolute terror or pure elation, and it's not really. There's not really an in between. So we'll get into it in a second, but you really have to understand how your own stress works, and you can get really good at managing your stress. So this is where I start to get lectury in a second because I feel strongly about these things. So you have to ask yourself, do you have what it takes? And the first question I ask people that are going to get into entrepreneurship is, do you have passion? And passion starts with that vision. As entrepreneurs, we have vision by default, and your vision gives your passion direction. And your passion gives your vision starting power. Your passion is how you get your business started in the first place. It's how you get your vision off the ground, or your company off the ground. But passion also gives you the staying power, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a little while. But when you're experiencing hard times, and you will experience many hard times, the most difficult things you experience in your life, you will experience as an entrepreneur without, some significantly critical incidents. And the passion is what gives you that staying power. The next thing is those downtimes. Can you handle stress? How many people in the room have explicit stress management frameworks, stuff that you practice on a regular basis or a daily basis? Me too. It does count, just don't take it too far. So, in limited use, we'll talk about the work hard, play hard reaction to that too. So I believe that stress is defined, it is the gap between the demands that are placed on us and our lack of the ability to create that demand. And as entrepreneurs, what you sign up for is having no idea what the demands are going to be placed. You just don't know. You don't know what you're going to encounter. You can go in, you say, I want to build a piece of tech. You find out the market doesn't understand you. Now you have to educate people. You hire sales folks who've been doing stuff for 20 years and they're very effective, but they don't understand what you do. You have to educate your own team, etc. You never know what the demands are going to be. And the ability to manage that stress and those uncertainties and those demands is what separates successful people from unsuccessful people, and that's what separates entrepreneurs from wantrepreneurs, people that never get off the ground. As far as some common stress management frameworks, if you guys are experiencing some of this stress, a lot of folks rely on faith. That's a great one. I'm a Stoic. I'm a practicing Stoic, so if you know Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius or any of those folks, I believe the obstacle is the way. Mindfulness is good. Meditation, breathing exercises, these are all good things. They take practice. They're skills like anything else. You want to check out your mental health. Go to therapy. You know, it's a touchy topic. You don't have to tell anybody that you go. But go if you need it. It's always easy to talk to somebody else that's not in your day-to-day life. Stress management is absolutely critical if you want to stay an entrepreneur and you want to maintain balance so that you and your team can maintain good, basically continue making good decisions. The next question that I ask people that want to be an entrepreneur is, are you comfortable with risk? Your answer has to be yes. And the reason is there is no reward without risk. There's no money, there's no impact. You're not going to change the world without risk. The world does not change with the status quo by definition. Again, as a young man, your risk is the best educator. You're going to encounter obstacles earlier than other people do. You're going to learn things faster than other people do if you accept risk, calculated risk. And you're going to have a broader range of skills. I'm at the point now where the mentors that I used to have that are in their 50s or 60s, they come to me for life advice. And this is a terrible thing for me, actually. It's something like I struggle with mentally. It doesn't cause me any problems, really, but when I have a problem, who the hell do I go to now, right? It puts you kind of in a class of your own, and it's an unexpected intent, and it's very challenging. So the next question is a bit controversial. I don't think this is all true for 100% of entrepreneurs, but you have to have somebody on your team or you have to be an evangelist. And this doesn't necessarily mean being a salesperson or knowing how to run a GTM function or being a marketer or anything like that. But this is what I'm doing right now. I am evangelizing entrepreneurism. I'm out here talking to the community, wanting to engage all of the folks in this room and say, hey, look, we're not alone. You have to be able to get up here and do stuff like this or talk one-on-one in groups. You have to be able to create your own network. You have to be able to attract your customers. How many tech entrepreneurs are in here, or like technical people that are starting their own businesses? How many of you guys know if you build an awesome product, your customers will come? Yeah, exactly. So I knew that too, and I was wrong. And it does not work that way. Yeah, you have to be able to listen and you have to be able to evangelize. And I'm actually an introvert, so I'm actually quite nervous talking up here, but I've defeated that over the years because this is a prerequisite for being effective, an effective leader and an effective entrepreneur. And the last question that I have is, do you have people skills? Because at the end of the day, people are going to work with people they like, and it's your job to create an environment and maintain a team of a positive culture and a team full of good people. So I was talking with a friend of mine a while ago who asks about how do I manage my stress, and is that actually true? Well, this is basically my stress over different periods. I just took some screenshots off of my phone, but you'll see when I take a dedicated thought into how to manage my stress and I activate my stress management framework, my stress dumps crazy. In the 24 to 48 hour period, it's just gone. It's like that. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a physician or anything like that, but the way that I think of it is I have all of this stress or cortisol from my day-to-day life, work, family, all the things that kind of just boil up, and I apply in my life. I'm also a crisis manager, so a career investigator and a career crisis manager. I deal with everybody's worst day all the time. And what I do is I work hard, play hard. So this is in Johnson Valley, California, right outside of 29 Palms. This is an off-road race. I clearly accept risk. And what happens is when I go out and do that, it replaces all of that long burn cortisol or that long burn stress with intense stress that I control. I can go off of that course anytime I want to, and when I'm done with that race, all of my stress is gone. And I'm now recharged. I'm physically tired, but as far as the stress and emotional tiredness, I'm ready to go back into the fray and deal with whatever I want to. So if you go back and you look at this, there's a correlation between when I have board meetings or when I had board meetings and when I do this. This normally comes right before or right after, depending on how the board meeting's going to go. Go ahead, Adrian.
And on those nights of the week where you're struggling to sleep, something's on your mind, it gives you something to think about.
Exactly.
You're totally divorced from the thing.
Exactly. It gives you hope. And you have to have fun. We talked about the importance of leadership. You have to have fun with your people. Your people come first, and they always come first. And if you do all these things, and you manage your stress, you create a healthy environment, and you have fun with your people, you'll get some of the best stuff ever. So those nights when you're having a terrible day, these are the things that I pop up. I almost get choked up with this part. Well, we'll just get that. People have had some great things to say about me because I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that they're effective and making some really hard decisions to get close friends of mine off the team because they were toxic to the rest of the organization. And that was my job and my responsibility. I had to terminate a long-term friendship multiple times. But that's the job. So what does it take to attract an awesome team? Actually, again, blank slate. What does it take to attract an awesome team? Because you don't start with one, you got to attract one. Anybody? Honesty, absolutely. A compelling vision, absolutely.
Demonstrated passion for what they're doing.
Absolutely. All of these things, they start with effective leadership. I assume vision for an entrepreneur, but you're right, an effective vision, and I'll get down to what that means for a lot of other folks in a second. But it's effective leadership, and effective leadership drives culture. Being able to demonstrate that passion. Demonstration of passion is evangelism, right? And that helps you create a network of those folks that you're going to hire and so on. And then the last thing is that vision. I assume because you already have access to hard problems because of your vision, and you just need to find the people that think those problems are interesting. Sounds pretty easy, right? You're right, it's not that easy. But the whole time it's not easy, you got to remember it's people first, mission always.
I'd say even more than interesting, it's got to be fun.
Yeah, fun, interesting, challenging. It's the sort of thing that you're not going to be able to pay people $500,000 a year to work on your problem. You're a startup. It's got to be fun and interesting, compelling. It's got to be the sort of things that people are going to take risks for your vision. And at Harangi also, in the early days, in the first 2 years, we didn't have a single person leave, other than one or two folks that we had to let go it was actually don't lie to me, don't steal to me, and don't harm my people. And I had to let some friends go. Other than that, the team cohesion stayed because of our compelling vision, our strong culture, and our leadership. You're going to face some obstacle. And as much as I believe the obstacle is the way, sometimes you will be the obstacle, and you've got to fix yourself. And the first thing that I've encountered, or one of the things that you encounter, is the Peter Principle. Anybody know what the Peter Principle is?
When you get promoted to your level of incompetence.
That's correct. You're an excellent engineer, you're an excellent individual contributor, salesperson, whatever it happens to be, and then you get promoted, and you find out leadership is actually a career change, and then you suck. And I have had this happen, and this is actually a cycle in startups, and you'll find out that the company outgrows you, and you suffer from the Peter Principle over and over again. It's brutal. People will find you arrogant, and you might actually know everything. It's true. It's like you might actually know everything that you need to be doing, but because you know it all, and maybe they don't, like you're just arrogant. And you have to let the company level up, and you as a leader are growing at a different speed. It's very difficult. And what happens is you end up losing. You lose star players and key customers. And the whole time that you're doing this, you don't know anything because you're an arrogant bastard. And you're just looking to have a good time, and you think you're the king of the world, and so on. and then it really starts to sink in. And then this is the impact it had on me. I wasn't homeless. I look homeless, but I wasn't homeless. You can actually see a little part of my house right there in the background, so I promise I had a house, but I was not homeless. And it was painful. It was a painful period of my life that it's painful to share, but it's important, right? We're not alone in entrepreneurship. It's absolute terror, or it's absolute elation. And when you go through these periods, I should have asked for help, and I didn't. It was my problem to solve. Anybody know what imposter syndrome is? This is an easy one. So normally what happens right after the Peter principle is you think you're awesome, then you realize you suck. But then after you realize you suck, there's this weird thing is you start to grow and you start to reflect on all the bad decisions you make, and you start to become an effective leader. But there's a gap between being effective and that your lack of confidence based on your past mistakes makes it hard to keep retaining your employees, find new ones, or find customers, and it creates stress. You will forget what your stress management framework is, and it's a very difficult period. And fortunately, there's some smart people out there that are way smarter than me. This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. I have seen many entrepreneurs live through this. I have lived through this at least twice myself. And the peak of Mount Stupid. This is the Peter principle. You found out you're dumb. You hit the valley of despair. You grow a long beard. You get very dirty, and your wife tells you that you should take a shower. But the good news is, actually, this graph is the scale, in my opinion. So there's a high or a very rapid ramp up to your overconfidence. And then there's a very rapid descent into your valley of despair. And then the valley of despair is actually a longer time period, in my experience, than the peak of Mount Stupid is. Like, you just embrace the suck, or you just are a victim to the suck for a long time. But eventually you start to figure out what enlightenment is, and you figure out how to handle things confidently. And you get yourself cleaned up. You go do crazy adventures in some other part of the world, and you just look healthier than you did 12 or 18 months before. And these pictures are literally... I went back through of all of my photos, and I found all of these things. This is definitely when I thought I was the shit. I did not feel that way here, but I looked like it. And then this is when I really started to figure out how to be a sustainable and an effective leader. Like, you can see it on my face. And I turned into Sam Bacon, yes. Samwise Gamgee. We'll go with that. Any other Hobbit jokes? Short jokes are very welcome, by the way. There's a long history of short jokes. Awesome. So we can talk some more about some leadership stuff. We can talk some more about some other things. I want to cover this. How many people want to know about like business metrics or the things that matter as you're getting started? Okay. Most of us will start a business. Most founders, I'm not sure that I know very many exceptions. We will start the idea, or we'll start this while we're working somewhere else. But there's two rules when you start your own company and you're working for someone else. Don't steal customers and don't steal employees. You can do it later, but you have to give them fair warning. Don't do it right off the bat. And I know the FTC says that non-competes are not enforceable, and that comes into effect later this year, but it's not a legal thing. It's an ethical and a moral thing. If you want to be part of an entrepreneurial community, don't steal customers and don't steal employees, unless it's cool with the employer. As you're getting started, you'll hear some people say that your company is in the idea phase or the POC phase, or you've reached product market fit. Other people will say you're in setup, or you're at launch phase, or you're scaling, or whatever. And then if you're talking to VC firms, they'll say pre-seed or seed or Series A or Series B. All this stuff means the same thing, and these are these terms make the most sense to me. Now, if you're working at a bank and you're thinking about starting your own company, can you scale your company while you're still working at a bank? No. But can you set up a company while you're still working at a bank? Get your LLC figured out. Can you come up with a business plan? Can you figure out who you want to hire as your first employees? You can do that. And it might just be an idea, but you can do that. And just to set some expectation of what that looks like, the numbers on the bottom are the number of people you'll normally need to have. It's not always full-time employees. Like, you can have a side hustle for a while or whatever. The launch phase takes more than one person, period. It might not be a full-time employee. You might be subcontracting things, but you still have people and personalities to manage to get your product or your service or whatever off the ground. And then scaling is interesting. So it's when you start scaling, you have 25 plus people, and this is the point where you're going to be managing managers, and that's the first time that leaders really hardcore fail and businesses become at risk. There's a company out there, or there's a concept out there called Dunbar's number. If you're approaching the scale stage and you're at 25 to 30 people, and you're struggling, like your manager is not doing very well, or a division that used to be good is starting to have problems, check out Dunbar's number. That's a good place to start to understand the problem, and the solution is an entirely separate thing that we're not going to cover right here today. As you start, you need these three things. You need an evangelizer, you need a value producer, and you need a finance guru. Oftentimes, the evangelizer is going to be the CEO, and this is the archetypical, or the stereotypical founder CEO. He's the guy that goes out there and spreads the message. He's going to help, or he or she or whomever is going to help bring in. In my case, it's been two male CEOs, and this is what I'm thinking of in my head. I've never been a CEO. So when I worked for two of them, they were really great at attracting new customers and explaining what we do. They were really great at attracting talent, but me, I was the value producer as the CTO or the lead of the consulting practice, and my job was to close those customers and figure out what the cost basis would be for service delivery or product delivery. So there's a very close relationship there. And we also had a finance guru, a person that can read a balance sheet, a P&L, a person that can do the most important thing for a startup that people forget, this person has to know how to do financial projections. Not just one, but a series of them, and those financial projections have to meet up with like the day-to-day reality of people. So like, if my people go write this code, what impact is that going to have on my cost basis or my projection or my ability to deliver value? Like, projections are critical in a startup. And the last piece is ops. Somebody has to take the check to the bank. Somebody has to manage GitHub. Somebody has to manage Google Workspace or whatever. And when you're getting off the ground, everybody does operations. So if one of your founders or your founding team is like, I'm not going to do operations, that's somebody else's job, that's a big red flag to me. Everybody has to do operations because the context of operations sits with different people. It's not a one-person job in the beginning. And at the end of the day, Jim Collins, a great leadership thought leader, has it right. If you get the right people on the bus and you put them in the right seat, you just point that thing in the right direction and you're going to go somewhere great. Easy metrics. This isn't 100% true, but it's a great rule of thumb. And this is something I've figured out on my own, and I think I've learned it from somebody, but I don't remember who. And if I need to give credit, I will. I just don't remember where I learned that. If you're in a startup, this is your target. You want a revenue per employee between $200,000 and $300,000, period. In some places, it's going to be higher than that, especially if it's a high-paid law firm or a partnership or something along those lines, but this is what you're aiming for. If you've got 25 employees and you're less than $100,000 per employee in revenue, you need to lay people off. You need to make the hard call and lay people off. The next thing that's a pretty easy one, we're not going to talk about how to figure out or calculate total addressable market, but your TAM needs to be 20 to 30 times what your revenue targets are. So if you want to hire 3 people, you basically need to make $1 million a year. And then if you want to make $1 million a year, your TAM needs to be $20 to $30 million because you're not going to attract every single customer. You're going to attract early adopters, and early adopters are between 1 and 3, maybe 1 and 5% of your market. Also, if you have a 20 to 30x TAM, after year 1 or year 2 or year 3, you're still going to have some room to grow into that market space. And then you'll have a good framework and understanding of how to identify a new market and start to spread out. Who here, any questions about venture-backed or bootstrapping? For the founders in the room, we probably know what these mean. For the other folks in the room, does anybody have a question around the difference between funding models? No? So venture-backed, somebody else is giving you money. There's a difference here. You have like strategic investors, think like a Cisco. You'll have institutional investors, think like a big bank, Deutsche Bank or something like that. And then you'll have VC firms, and there's a whole bunch of different terms, and nobody really agrees what strategic or any of these other things are. There's no playbook here really, unless you're in Silicon Valley. There's a very clear playbook in Silicon Valley. When you take venture-backed money, there's a difference between a family office and a VC. At our scale, we don't want PE firms or private equity firms. We want a VC firm, and we probably want a family office that is going to grow with us rather than somebody that's going to tell us how to run our businesses. Generally speaking, if you take VC money, you're going to grow faster, and you're going to have access to smarter people. And those smarter people are going to help you grow and make sure that you grow as closely or as quickly as the company does. But at the end of the day, a lot of times your company will outgrow your ability to lead it. You have to remove your ego, and if that means you're no longer good as a founder CEO, then you need to find a better CEO, or you need to figure out a better management structure so that you can maintain effective leadership and culture within your organization. Bootstrapping is another option. If at all possible, I would recommend bootstrapping because there's many less variables and much less stress or different types of stress in bootstrapping than there are in VC-backed firms. I do love the investors that I've worked with over the years, but if I had $1 million in the bank, I would invest it myself before going to outside funding. This gives you the opportunity to grow sustainably. So instead of looking for 200% growth or 300% growth, you'll get 30 or 40% growth, which is actually wildly successful for any business. And you also have complete control of how you grow and where you grow. That's very important. VC firms will often tell you have to open an office in some other country or whatever, and it's crazy, but that's what they do because they want to exploit their networks, their inner personal networks. The other thing is when you bootstrap, you own all the financial risk. So if things go bad, then you're out of money, and that's on you, and nobody else is going to help you with that. There's no insurance or anything else. It's just you, and you're out of money. So that's a real thing. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to kind of show you guys a little bit about these are the last 3 or 4 slides. So there's a difference between starting a consultancy and starting a managed service provider, an MSSP, and a product. There's some other things out there like government contractors or like a hardware startup. I've got a little bit of experience in all of those things, but most of my experience is going to be in a product startup, which I have a lot of experience in, a managed service or a consultancy. Does anybody care? Show of hands. Who wants to talk most about a consultancy? Okay. A managed service, an MSSP? Okay. And then a product company? Okay. We're going to go in reverse order here, and we're going to talk about a product company. Does anybody have a question? So take a look at this. I'm not going to read everything off of here. Does anybody have a question about these, what's on the slide at this point, or that's related to your business? Yes. So there's a bunch of those things. So I'll go through the metrics first. The pros and cons, I think, speak for themselves. If anybody has questions, please ask. Again, look at your annual revenue per employee. So that 200 to 300,000, that's annual revenue per employee. Net promoter score in general, that's basically how much your customers like you or like your product. So there's ways to go about measuring that. There's some other things. The acronyms are escaping me right now, but there's at least 2 other ones that I've used. None of them are perfectly accurate. They're in the middle of subjective and objective scores. So there's a lot of internal debate in any product company about how to measure them and what they mean. But they are a key score. And as long as you measure them the same way, it doesn't really matter how. As long as you measure them the same way over time, it'll be like that stress app that I have that I showed you guys earlier. I have no idea if it's accurate. But it measures it the same way every time, and I can see on a day-to-day basis, if I take this action, then my stress goes down. Net promoter scores are the same way. If I take X action or I build Y feature, then I expect my net promoter score to go up or my net promoter score to go down. But at the end of the day, it's a subjective measure. A couple of things on here that I'd like to talk about. Annual recurring revenue that's the lifeblood, like your subscription service. There's some MRR plays in here too. Really, right now, you're going to get venture money for a product. It's like trying to self-start a product is very difficult. If you want to do that, I want to hear your story and I'll help you with that. But generally speaking, you're going to have to grow faster so that you can maintain speed with the market, and that means you're going to need to raise money from a venture capital firm. They care about ARR, annual recurring revenue, versus MRR right now. And you also need to understand your burn rate and your runway. Burn rate is at the end of the month, how much money did you lose? Because product companies are not profitable for quite a while, between say 3 and 5 years, and some of them are not profitable up to 10 years. And that's okay. That's expected from a venture capital perspective, but you're going to be in a long time fundraise cycle from a pre-seed all the way through a Series C or a Series D fundraise, and there's a lot of context around all that. So burn rate is how much money you lose every month. Runway is how many months you can pay payroll. So if I have $1 million in the bank and I have $100,000 a month in burn rate, then I've got 10 months to live as a company. And you have to manage that with all of the features that you're building, all of your fundraise efforts. Fundraising does not take 3 months. It does not take 6 months. It takes 12 to 18 months, unless you're just. I know somebody who raised $5.5 million in like 5 weeks. I don't know how he did it, but that guy is awesome, and I bought him drinks a couple weeks ago, and I don't think he knows how he did it either. As a product company, when we won't talk about the usage stuff, customer lifetime value. So when I was in Singapore, we call this LCV, lifetime customer value. I like that because the acronym's shorter. But here, it seems like the most common thing at this time is CLTV, or customer lifetime value. How much are they paying you? If they're paying you $100,000 and on average your customers are with you for 3 years, your LCV is $300,000. I mean, so revenue per customer, revenue per employee. LCV is important. There's a bunch of stuff, a bunch of tooling that you have to have inside your organization to calculate that. Most product companies never get here. Like you hear that 8 to 10 or 80 to 90% of startups fail. They fail before they calculate this. If you understand what your LCV is, it gives you a hell of a lot more control of your decisions and what you should do wherever in your organization to improve your ARR, your lifeline. We had some managed service or MSSP folks that were interested in that. Do we have any questions related to MSSP? Anything in particular? So the biggest thing about an MSSP.
I'm particularly interested in the low margins.
Yes, the low margins.
Having low margins.
There's a couple of things. So there's a couple of things that lead to low margins in MSSPs right now. One of them is it's very highly competitive, and a lot of folks try to compete on price. If you are a cybersecurity company, do not compete on price. Let me say that again. If you are a cybersecurity company, do not compete on price. Period. Don't do it.
Just a cybersecurity company competing for price is a sucker's game in any market.
Yeah, you want to say that?
It's not just cybersecurity, it's any industry. Competing for price is a sucker's market.
100%. Don't do it. So that's the number one reason for low margins is the people that start MSSPs, they don't know what they're doing. So they feel like their only value proposition is to compete on price. And when you compete on price, you devalue yourself. There is no value proposition. The second reason that margins are low is because everybody knows what XDR is. You have a whole bunch of tools in the chain or whatever. You got 1,000 different things to manage. So you end up with complex service delivery, and that includes configuration, customer onboarding, installing stuff at various places or whatever. Like firewalls make this really hard because there's like provisioning and everything else. It's like if I was going to do an MSSP, there's a 0% chance I would ship hardware. Wouldn't happen. Everything's going to be in the cloud, at least in today's world. So that's where the low margins come from. And also keep in mind, if you have an EDR and a firewall, and every tool that you have to have more than one. You have to hire more than one person to deploy and support that tool. So you're increasing the complexity of your organization by default. Just right off the bat, it's very complicated. You can do it. There's some companies out there that are doing this well, but you don't get good at this by starting. If you want to be an MSSP that does this full gambit of stuff, start with one thing and add one thing every year or two. So start with an EDR, and then after a couple of years add firewall services, and that gives you upsell and cross-sell ability within your existing customer base rather than going with a complicated go-to-market function to a brand new market. MRR matters here more. I don't know why. I don't know why there's a difference between MRR or ARR. If there's somebody that's smarter than me, please let me know. And operational efficiency is probably the other thing. SLAs matter in MSSPs because if you don't meet an SLA, you'll get fired. Being time to resolution, that's probably the biggest one.
Would the MRR be more of a how sustainable on a short-term basis is your revenue? So you have to endure a shortfall?
I suspect that's it. So I feel like investors want ARR because they're planning 3 to 5 years out, and I feel like MRR makes more sense because MSSPs Consultancies are frequently not investable by VC firms, with rare exception. MSSPs can be, so it's like middling investment, and you're generally planning quarter by quarter, and then everybody invests in product companies, and you almost have to at this stage, and you're not planning quarter to quarter, you're planning year to year, so that's where the ARR versus MRR comes from. But I'm not actually positive, because the questions that I get around ARR are much more like, what are you going to do next quarter questions, and I'm like, it's a complex game as an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of folks around you that don't really understand what you do. Any more questions about MSSP stuff?
What's the best way to reach out to small, medium-sized businesses to
Oof.
market yourself?
That's a great question. So marketing is, I almost added a slide for this. I wish I had a whiteboard. I'd draw it out right now. So there's a few things that have to come first, and selling cyber is not the same thing as selling a different product. And there's a couple of reasons for that. In cybersecurity, there's a thinking adversary on the other side. So, when you're, generally speaking, when you build a bridge or you build a toothbrush or you build a hammer, most of the time people are not intentionally trying to defeat your product. In cybersecurity, they are literally, like, you build something and they intentionally try to defeat it. I mean, terrorist events happen and you get, asshole contractors that try to break tools. That happens, but that's not the primary use case, right? In cybersecurity, we're building defenses and there's attackers out there every day trying to circumvent those things. So that changes the paradigm and the buying habits and everything else. Like, it's just different. So selling in cyber is different. And the best way to establish your brand is evangelism, right? Like, if you're starting a company, you have to go out to these conferences, you have to reach out to this community, reach out to your fellow entrepreneurs and say, hey man, where does an opportunity exist for me, or who should I talk to, right? That's where you start. Your brand starts with you, and at some point you need to separate you from your business's brand. And then after that, you'll have event-based marketing. Once you have a little bit of a brand, it helps you grow your brand, going to conferences, doing webinars and things along those lines. That's how you start to get your name out there. And at some point, you can start doing the marketing emails and things along those lines. I find far less effectiveness with that sort of marketing. It's really about establishing a trust relationship with your customer. So, like, if you want to establish trust, do you send an email, have a phone call, or meet them in person, right? And that's just the cold, hard truth of it. At some point, you have a brand like a Mandiant or a CrowdStrike or a SentinelOne where emails work or people want to buy your thing. But, your sales will increase, but it's not going to increase the trust with the customer. And it'll degrade, but it just won't matter to the business that the trust is degraded a bit. Does that make sense? Any other questions? Awesome. Consultancies. Any questions around consultancies? I'm picking on you, Nicole.
Oh, I'll find like 10 of them. Just give me a minute.
So utilization rate is basically, we'll say a consultant has to work 100 hours. 100 hours or is planned for 100 hours in a time period. A utilization rate is how many of those hours you actually sell and deliver value to a customer. Billable efficiency is very similar to that, but it's like, in one scenario, maybe I'm wrong. I like to think of billable efficiency in terms of delivering an outcome versus getting somebody to buy an hour from me. So I might have 100 hours that I'm supposed to sell in a time period, but if I can sell 300 hours, I will, and it's because I'm going to deliver an outcome rather than bill for every single minute I'm working on something. So that's kind of billable efficiency. And there's also, like, if you are billing by the hour, are you billing by your $300 an hour rate every time? Are you giving any sort of discounts and things along those lines? Again, the formulas are something you should go research on your own a little bit later. I'm happy to provide some. It's not even advice. I would say I would provide my perspective on that, and the way that you measure these metrics is going to be dependent on your company, and it's subject to change. Even with your own company, you might change it over time. Sure.
For my last position. And I had, most of them did it by the hour. And then I had one firm come in and they like to do flat rate. They were like, when
Yeah.
you done, when you need it by, and we'll give you a number. And then that's just how they roll. So is there an advantage to the consultancy business doing one versus the other?
In the terms of a contact, so The advantage of doing it by the hour is you can have predictable revenue projections, assuming that you can actually sell the hours. Billing by outcome or billing by like flat rate billing. I don't call it flat rate billing, and that's just like a marketing thing or a salesy thing, an evangelism thing, right? I call it billing by outcome, and the advantage there is higher margins. That's it. Like I'm going to sell an outcome. If I say this is going to be 100 hours, or I think this is going to be 100 hours, I'm going to try to deliver it for less hours than that, so my margins go up on a project basis.
Yeah, I would just add, as the buyer, the consultancy assumes more risk when they deliver on a flat fee.
100%, because it can absolutely go up. Like if you assume it's 100 hours and the client's not happy and you get it wrong, then don't do that if you have a brand new consultancy with inexperienced consultants. Like they have to be experienced consultants with experience with that particular customer's problem. So if it's a situation where you're like, I don't know, I think I can do that, bill by the hour. If it's a situation where it's like, oh yeah, I've done this 100 times and this normally takes me about 3 weeks, bill them for 4 weeks for the outcome because they're paying for the quality, and then deliver it in 2 weeks, right? And they're not paying for your time in that case. In incident response, I've worked several cases like this where it's been 160 hour, 200 hour engagement. We'll just say 100 hours for round numbers. I go in and we'll exaggerate and say at the end of day one that the thing is contained, and they'll be like, well, I'm not going to pay you your 100 hours. I'm like, yes, you are. And they're like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, okay, well, let's think about this. What is a better outcome for your company? For that fire that's in your house to burn for the next 100 hours, or do you want me to put that fire out? And if your actual house is on fire, would you pay me $100,000 to put that fire out in an hour, or would you pay me $100,000 to put that fire out over a 2-week period or 3-week period or whatever, right? So I just don't buy and that's the outcome-based billing sort of thing. Yes, sir.
What's the best way to handle clients who are slow to pay?
That's a good question. This is what you need a finance guru for. So there's a couple of techniques for that. Like the net 30, net 60, net 90, they don't help you with clients that aren't going to pay. Other than if you do a net 30, you can send them to collections. Beyond that, you can protect yourself by upfront billing or milestone billing and things along those lines. So there's a lot of nuance around milestone billing. Billing. So if you do like a 3 milestone thing, a lot of customers will try to front load all of that work and try to get you to do all of the work in the first milestone, and then they'll just pay you for that, not pay you for anything else. So there's nuance there, but the answer is send them to collections if they're delinquent already, and the other answer is get half your money up front or more. And then if you do 50% up front, that better be break even, so that you're not actually losing anything. In the back, yes, sir.
Any models with like a retainer or anything like that? That's not really like having a retainer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about retainers. I was thinking project-based stuff with my current context. Yeah, retainers are another good way for that. There's some interesting stuff you can do with retainers out there, like use it or lose it type retainers. Those are great. Not a lot of customers want to sign up for those. Those are like a better add-on sort of thing to other services. But yeah, retainers are a great way to protect yourself. It protects your revenue, but one of the experiences that I have is that if you sign it on January 1st and it's a 12-month retainer, then you're going to have some operation or some execution risk from your client base in December, because they're going to all want to activate in the last quarter of that retainer cycle.
On the billing front, my company started with net 30 terms, and I looked into it because I had a lot of slow-paying people, and I found a study that said that net 14 resulted in the fastest payments. I changed it. I noticed an improvement, but many of my customers dictated the terms to me of the invoice of net 30.
Yeah.
So I did it what I could. 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about offering them a slight discount, like a percentage for like 30 versus 60 versus 90 days payment? Does that help?
I'm not sure. It depends on the market segment. I don't really have a ton of experience with that. At the point where we did experiment with that, but I had a finance person that handled most of those things. I basically set I would set what on the consulting side, I would say this is how much I want to get out of this thing. These are what my margins need to be on the consulting side, which at that time we were really good in like 50 to 65% margins, like rocking and rolling. I don't know what the recovery rate was, what impact that had on the recovery rate.
So for the first 6 to 8 months, I really focused on sales and trying to get customers. Now that I actually have a bunch of them,
Oh, gotcha. So one of the things I didn't say earlier is it is far easier to be a startup with 3 people than it is to be with one person. And for God's sake, do not have an even number of founders. It will drive you crazy. So in that case, I believe you're a solopreneur, so you're in this yourself, and you're going to have lumpy revenue, right? And there's kind of a cycle where it's like you don't have a brand yet. You start to do some work, you start to attract some customers, and then you have to deliver on that. So now you're swapping revenue risk with execution risk, and it just becomes this kind of it becomes a cycle. And at some point, you'll have enough revenue in the bank, or you'll have enough market demand out there, and hopefully a little bit of inbound sales in addition to your outbound sales, where you start to pick somebody up part-time or full-time. And it's really when you get to that second or third person where the work and the division of labor starts to I guess, normalize. So have somebody that delivers this particular type of work, and when you start selling something, you can sell in the short term only that sort of thing. I mean, you're not going to say no to revenue, but you're going to try to prioritize like consulting service A, because you have a person that can do that, and if they do that, your business generates revenue, and you can continue to focus on revenue generation. Now, if you're signing 12-month contracts, which is good, you'll get you end up with lumpy revenue and lumpy execution. And where you really want the lumpiness, if you can get 12-month contract cycles, is you want that in the revenue-generating aspect at this phase of the business. So we're talking now about the startup and the launch phase, right? It's like if you're a consultancy and you're doing it first, like get a bunch of contracts, go work on those contracts, put some money on the bank, and then don't focus on sales for a little while. It sounds painful. A lot of entrepreneurs are going to disagree with me. But if you got a 12-month contract, wait 6 months and then start the sales cycle again, right? And queue up some work that's a little bit later. And it's just painful in the first part. It's painful, it's confusing, and there's probably a case-by-case basis on the type of advice or observations I would share with one consultancy versus another. There's a lot of variables in there. You're going to have cycles. It's going to be work delivery cycles or revenue generation cycles. It's just the reality. 3 people takes the pain away. Other questions? We only got a few minutes left, so...
If 3 people keep the pay rate, but you can't afford to pay them that magic number, then what's a good solution to that?
Yeah, so that's I don't have an answer to that. That is the quintessential magic of an entrepreneur, right? And this comes in the setup phase. So if you have 3 people that you want to go with, part of the setup is determining that division of labor, and then understanding if you want to go start with these 3 people, it's going to require this much funding or that much revenue. And in consultancies, often you start with a partnership where every person is responsible for bringing in their own revenue, and that's how you'd solve it there. In a product company, you just raise more money. It's not that simple, but it's a simple answer.
So what happens in early situations where you come in with, you're founding something that you're very passionate about and have a lot of belief in, but what winds up happening is the other people that are joining you in your initial founding just start having major value clashes, and you don't want to leave because you're passionate about it, but you also don't want to be in that toxic situation.
Yeah, this is why entrepreneurship is hard. Somebody's got to put their adult pants on and make some hard calls. And generally speaking, that's going to be the CEO's decision or CEO's responsibility, depending on what your operating agreement looks like, or you might be able to fire somebody. If they're having major value clashes, they're not going to work long term. It's just not going to work. And the earlier you make that deep cut and right size the team, the better it's going to be for you. But you're still going to look like a homeless guy for making that decision. I mean, that's basically what happened here, right? Exactly that same sort of thing. But you got to do it, and that's your job, and you're responsible for your team. Any other questions?
If you were picking to start your first business, which one of those 3 models would you start?
Yeah, it depends on the market opportunity, and it depends on the solution. I guess. Well, here's the last message. I'll just leave this up here. Right now, I'm helping a founder build a product company, and I've done a couple of product companies now. Or this is my second solid opportunity at a product company. If I had to do something from this, the next thing that I would do would probably be a small consultancy that looks more like a small business than a a full-blown startup or venture-backed thing, and that's just because, I mean, we were talking about cycles a minute ago. You can only deal with that stress, those types of stress, for so long before you just need a break. I don't know if I would ever go work at a large firm again or a large company again. I can see realities where I would, but I like having control over my destiny and the team's destiny, and so hopefully that answers your question. In the back.
Any guidance on transitioning like a services or managed services business to a product?
Yes, actually, a lot of product companies come out of a service solution. My company, Harangi, did. Binalize started with that previously, as there was a bunch of services and some engineering services and things that came out. The thing that you get with consultancies is you get direct access to the customer problem, and you get to iterate on the solution. And in the situation where you find a productizable or systematic solution, you can turn that into a product. So I do have some advice about that. I've done that a few times, and I've helped some other founders, but we've only got a few minutes left, and that's a little bit beyond the scope of this talk. All right. I can give you guys 5 minutes back, or I can take one more question.
So more specifically to the question was, when you decide to, if you need to pull the cord on yourself to leave, like the company, like you started something you're extremely passionate about, but it's just the people you started it with can't put up with anymore. You don't have the power to cut them loose, or you're not in a situation.
Is it affecting, so the questions you got to ask yourself, is it affecting your personal life, and is it affecting your stress? Like, are you losing sleep? Is your personal health degrading? Are relationships outside of your business degrading as a result of the toxic environment you're in? And if the answer to enough of those things is yes, then that's the time. It's when you notice it and you realize that there's not a lot that you can do to fix the situation. That's when you pull the cord. Of course. All right. Well, thank everybody for your time today, and yeah, thanks.